I started working at the company in 2004. It was a small place back then, maybe 20 of us jammed into a single-floor office with flickering lights and carpets that hadn't been cleaned in years. My title was nothing fancy, operations coordinator. I didn't even have my own desk at first. I shared a corner table with two other people and we all rotated shifts to use the same chair. But I was grateful. I needed the job. I had bills, I had a family to support, and after getting laid off the year before, I wasn't in a position to be picky. Still, I remember telling myself that if they gave me a chance, I'd prove I was worth keeping. And that's exactly what I did. I worked late most nights. No one asked me to, but I wanted to. I stayed back to fix things that didn't work, updated spreadsheets people forgot about, and handled the messes no one else wanted to deal with. My boss at the time, Sarah, once told me, "You're the quiet backbone of this place." I didn't need praise, I just needed to know I was doing something that mattered. Over the next few years, I rose through the ranks slowly. From operations coordinator to senior coordinator, then assistant manager. By 2012, I was managing the entire logistics team. By 2017, I was overseeing 3 departments. The pay was never sky high, but the trust, that was everything to me. They leaned on me during hard quarters. I helped lead the transition when the company merged with a larger firm. I was the one who trained the fresh grads, taught them how things actually ran beyond what manuals said. I was the one people called when servers crashed at 2 a.m., when a shipment went missing, when a mistake on a report risked a lawsuit. 19 years, that's more than just a job, that's a life. I watched people come and go, some left for better offers, some couldn't handle the pressure. A few were let go unfairly, I remember their faces. I survived layoffs, restructures, 3 CEOs and 2 moves. My ID badge had to be reprinted 5 times because the lamination peeled off from daily use. Then came Travis. Travis was young, 35 maybe, MBA from some fancy place, and carried himself like he'd already saved 10 companies. He came in as the new regional director and instantly made waves. I tried to be welcoming, sent him an email on his first day offering a rundown of how the teams worked, where the pain points were, who the top performers were. He never replied. He spent his first few weeks in closed-door meetings with consultants and barely acknowledged anyone unless their name ended in VP. Then one morning, he stopped by my desk. "Hey, you're the ops guy, right?" "Technically head of ops," I smiled. "Right, yeah, look, I'm doing a performance review sweep. Let's talk next week." I nodded. No big deal, I was used to that sort of thing. Reviews came and went. Mine were always solid. I wasn't flashy, but I delivered results, always had. But next week didn't bring a conversation, it brought a calendar invite titled Transition Planning, Ops Leadership. I assumed it was a restructure. Maybe they were splitting roles. Maybe I was going to help mentor someone new. I even wore a tie that day, thinking it was something more formal. Travis didn't waste time. "Appreciate all you've done here," he said, barely glancing up from his laptop. "But we're going in a different direction. We're bringing in someone with a fresh perspective." That was it. No warning, no build-up, no review, no thank you for nearly 2 decades of loyalty. Just a few sentences and a cold nod. He slid a severance envelope across the table like it was a restaurant check. I sat there, stunned. 19 years, I'd trained half the people working under him, I'd written the very protocols he used. And now I was being shown the door like some outdated filing cabinet. I didn't argue, I didn't cry, I just took the envelope, stood up and said, "Good luck." He didn't respond, didn't even look up again. When I walked out of that office, it didn't feel real. My badge still worked. My parking spot still had my name. People waved at me, assuming I was heading to a meeting. I nodded back like nothing was wrong. I drove home in silence. I didn't even turn on the radio. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the envelope unopened. My wife asked me what was wrong, and all I could say was, "He replaced me." She didn't ask who, she didn't need to. She just sat with me while I stared at the table, trying to understand how loyalty could be so cheap in the eyes of someone who'd never had to earn it. The days after getting fired were the quietest of my adult life. I didn't tell many people at first, just my wife, then my brother, and a close friend I used to grab lunch with on Fridays. I didn't post anything online, I didn't touch my resume, I didn't even open the severance package for 3 days. I'd go for walks in the morning just to get out of the house, but my feet always led me nowhere. A few blocks here, a bench there, just me and the quiet buzz of a world that no longer needed me at 9 a.m. I wasn't ashamed, I was numb. You don't give 19 years of your life to something and just move on. It's not like I'd been slacking or dragging my feet. I wasn't dead weight, I was dependable, reliable. the one who stayed when things were falling apart, but none of that had mattered. The hardest part wasn't the job loss, it was the loss of identity. Every morning for nearly 2 decades, I woke up with a purpose. Now I was watching daytime TV, scrolling through job boards without meaning to click anything, drinking too much coffee and opening the fridge just to close it again. It's a strange kind of grief, like mourning someone who's still alive but suddenly doesn't know your name. My wife, Rachel, was supportive, but I could see the worry in her eyes. She never said it out loud, but she knew this wasn't just about money, it was personal. I caught her looking at me differently, like she was watching to see when I'd snap out of it or worse, sink deeper. Then one afternoon, I saw something that lit a fire I didn't know I had left. I was scrolling LinkedIn half-heartedly, trying to convince myself I was networking, when I saw a post from Travis. Big photo, big smile, big headline, excited to announce our new operational model driven by fresh leadership. He tagged the guy who replaced me, Jason, a former consultant I'd worked with briefly years ago. Jason had been green, eager, but messy. I had coached him through a few disaster projects back then. Nice guy, not bad at what he did, but not nearly experienced enough to run the operation I'd built. The caption was worse: efficiency isn't just about experience, it's about evolution. Time to leave the old behind. That one stung. Leave the old behind. That was me, wasn't it? It felt like someone erased my name from a chalkboard while I was still standing there holding the eraser. I stared at that post for a while, clicked Jason's profile. He updated it fast. Director of Operations leading a bold transformation. I won't lie, I almost threw my coffee mug, but instead I did something better. I opened a folder on my desktop I hadn't touched in years. Inside were every template, every system model, every contingency playbook I had ever created. Stuff the company still used because I built it. I spent years refining those processes, adapting them, stress testing them. And none of them were ever formally documented by the company. I had designed them on my own time, improved them quietly, made backups, because I cared, because I wanted to make things better. They fired me, but they never asked me to hand over those systems. So now they were sitting with Jason, trying to make sense of tools and workflows he didn't understand, trying to rebuild things he'd never had to manage under pressure. I closed the folder, then I reopened it. Then I started making notes, not for revenge yet, but just to remember how much of that place had my fingerprints on it. 2 days later, I got a message from Karen, one of my old team leads. Hey, sorry, I know it's weird, but Jason's been asking a lot of questions about the supply chain dashboard. No one can figure out why the numbers aren't syncing. He's, struggling a lot. I didn't reply right away, I just sat there reading it over and over. I knew that dashboard backward. I'd built it from scratch using tools the company didn't even license properly yet. It wasn't broken, it was just misunderstood. More messages followed. Do you remember how the freight audit tracker worked? Jason, asking if you have the old SLA doc, the updated one from 2021. I started to smile. Not because they were struggling, but because I wasn't crazy. I had mattered. I had built something valuable, and they'd tossed it aside like it could be downloaded from a manual. That night I told Rachel everything, not just about the messages or the files, but how I wanted to do something with it, not out of spite but out of clarity. I wasn't done, not yet. She nodded, then go remind them who you are. The next morning I opened my resume. Then I opened a blank email draft. Because the next chapter wasn't going to be about what they took from me, it was going to be about what I still had left to offer and who would appreciate it. And maybe, just maybe, Travis was about to learn what regret really felt like. I didn't wake up one day and decide to get even. It wasn't about revenge, not really. What I felt wasn't anger, it was precision. Cold, steady, focused, like a pressure valve had released in my chest. I wasn't out to destroy Travis or the company. I was out to remind people who built the damn machine they were trying to run without a manual. The first thing I did was clean up my resume. I hadn't updated it in years. I kept it simple, factual, but sharp. Numbers matter. People want to see what you've done, not just your title but the weight you carried, so I wrote the truth. Reduced operational waste by 27% across 3 departments. Designed and implemented scalable logistics tracking adopted company-wide. Led 3 successful merger integrations without staff attrition. Built and maintained the company's freight audit, vendor SLA, and inventory systems from scratch. It read like a record of someone who should never have been replaced. Then I made some calls, not to recruiters, to people. There's this thing about staying in one place for 19 years, you forget how many people pass through your orbit. Colleagues, interns, contractors, vendors, partners. I had coffee with an old supplier rep I hadn't seen in a decade. He was now the COO of a mid-sized tech logistics startup. He remembered me right away. "Wait, they let you go." "Just like that," I said, sipping my coffee. He leaned back. "Well, damn, our ops lead is 2 months into his notice period. Wanna talk?" We didn't even finish our drinks before we set up a real meeting. The calls kept going, the emails came back faster than expected. People remembered me. More importantly, they remembered how I worked, how I fixed things quietly, made teams better, made problems smaller. Within a week, I had 3 interviews lined up. But what really kicked things into gear was the meeting with Lisa. She had been on my team for 4 years, hard worker, sharp, no ego. After I left, she'd stayed on more out of loyalty to the team than to Jason or Travis. We met at a quiet little place near the old office. She looked over her shoulder twice before sitting down. "Jason's drowning," she said, eyes wide. "I figured," I said. "No, I mean drowning. Reports are late, vendors are walking. He keeps blaming the team, but he's in over his head. Half the people want to quit." I stayed quiet, letting her vent. "Travis is still pushing new models, still acting like it's all part of the plan, but morale's shot. People are scared." I could feel it happening. The cracks were widening, the structure was starting to shake, all because one person thought he could swap out loyalty for a shiny resume and some buzzwords. Then Lisa leaned in. "2 people from your old team said if you ever started something anywhere, they'd follow." I didn't say anything right away, but I was listening. That night I sat in front of a whiteboard in my garage, the same one I used to plan rollout schedules, sketch org charts, and map vendor chains. I wrote 3 names on the board: Lisa, Ken, Maria, all solid, all trusted, all still stuck in a system that had no idea how much it relied on them. What if I didn't just find a new job? What if I built something? I pulled up my emails, drafted a message to the startup COO I had coffee with, told him I had a systems proposal I wanted to walk him through, not a resume pitch, not a job ask, a solution, something I could implement in weeks, not months, something that could grow fast if supported by the right people. He replied in 6 minutes. "Can you come in Monday and show me what you've got?" That weekend, I built the pitch deck like I used to build frameworks, layer by layer, grounded in reality, clean, functional, scalable. I pulled in fragments from the systems I'd created over the years. I stripped the logos, anonymized the data, made sure everything I used was mine, original, unowned, and legally safe to repurpose. When I walked into that Monday meeting, I didn't bring a resume, I brought a plan. And by the end of it, the COO looked at me, smiled, and said 5 words I hadn't heard in far too long. "When can you start building?" I didn't look back after that. 2 weeks later, I had a contract. I wasn't an employee, I was a partner. I wasn't reporting to someone like Travis, I was shaping the next stage of something real, and slowly word started spreading. Lisa joined first. Then Maria, after giving notice and surviving a brutal exit interview. And a week later I got a message from Ken. It was short, just 6 words. "Tell me where to sign." It wasn't about revenge, not yet, but the silence I left behind was starting to echo. And soon, the ones who thought I'd disappear were going to realize I'd never been louder. About a month after I officially started with the startup, let's call them Vertex, I got my first real sign that Travis was feeling the pressure. It wasn't a phone call or an email, it was a LinkedIn update. Jason, the guy who replaced me, had quietly changed his job title. No post, no fanfare, just a shift from Director of Operations to Consultant Operational Strategy. I caught it while checking a vendor contact. I clicked into his profile just to be sure. Same company, same office, different title. It screamed demotion. I leaned back in my chair and for a moment I just stared at the screen, not with satisfaction yet, but with clarity. This wasn't personal anymore, it was structural. They hadn't just removed me from my seat, they had removed the foundation that seat was built on. Now the floors were creaking. At Vertex, things were moving faster than I'd anticipated. The pitch I gave had turned into a real rollout. I'd been tasked with designing the entire operational infrastructure from scratch: vendor management, logistics flow, internal comms, the works. And unlike my last role, I wasn't met with blank stares or delays. When I asked for input, I got it. When I flagged an issue, it was fixed. People listened. Even better, people trusted. Lisa was thriving. She'd taken charge of onboarding and ops reporting and, in her own words, finally felt useful again. Maria had streamlined the procurement workflow in under 2 weeks. Ken, who had always been the quiet one, surprised us all by leading a high-level negotiation with a supplier and knocking it out of the park. It was like someone had flipped the lights back on for all of us. And while we were building, they were crumbling. I started getting quiet messages from people still inside my old company. They just restructured again. No one knows who's reporting to who. Travis brought in an outside firm to audit ops, third one in 2 months. We missed a contract renewal. It lapsed without anyone noticing. It was happening. The collapse wasn't sudden, it was slow, like a crack crawling across glass. Everyone could see it, but no one wanted to admit it. Then one day, I got the message that changed everything. "Travis wants to talk to you. He asked if I had your number." It was from Karen, another former colleague still on the inside. I hadn't spoken to her in months. She didn't say more than that, but I knew what it meant. Travis had reached the part of his downfall where desperation sets in. I didn't respond right away. I needed to think. There was a time when I would have dropped everything to help, when I still believed the company cared as much as I did. But that illusion had shattered the moment I was replaced without a single handshake or exit meeting. Still, I was curious. What did he want? An apology without saying the word, a favor, a fix, a lifeline. So I replied with 5 words: "He can email me directly." A few hours later, the email came. Subject: reconnect. "Hey, heard you've landed somewhere new. Congrats, would love to catch up sometime soon. Let me know if you're open to a quick chat." No mention of what happened, no acknowledgement of the way things ended. Just smooth, neutral language designed to feel like nothing ever went wrong. I left it unread for 2 days. Then I replied, "Happy to connect, send a time and an agenda. I'm quite full this week but can carve out 15 minutes. I kept it polite, professional, but cold. It felt like a reversal, him knocking, me choosing whether or not to answer. The meeting invite came through 10 minutes later, Friday, 4:15 p.m. Late enough that no one else would be around, a time for quiet deals and discreet conversations. I accepted. That whole week I didn't mention it to anyone, not Lisa, not Ken, not Maria. I needed to walk into that call with a clear mind, no echoes, no bias. I wasn't there to gloat, I was there to listen. When Friday came, I logged in 2 minutes early. Travis joined 2 minutes late. He looked different, less polished. There were lines under his eyes and a slight tension in his jaw he was clearly trying to hide. "Thanks for making the time," he said, smiling thinly. "No problem," I replied. He jumped right in. "I'll cut to it. Things have shifted quickly here. Some of the models we tried to implement haven't scaled the way we hoped. I think it's fair to say you were holding more of the infrastructure than we realized." He didn't say we messed up. He didn't say I made a mistake, but it was the closest I was going to get. "I've been following your work at Vertex," he continued. "Impressive, very clean, thoughtful execution." He paused, waited as if fishing for some gratitude or validation. I gave him none. "What are you looking for, Travis?" He cleared his throat. "We'd be open to a consulting relationship, short term, just to stabilize things, maybe help guide some of the existing systems back on track. We're willing to be flexible." That word flexible didn't land the way he hoped. I looked at him for a moment, then smiled, calm, controlled. "Thanks, but I'm fully committed to where I am, and I've already moved on." Travis nodded, trying to stay composed. "Right, of course, worth asking." After the call, I closed my laptop slowly. Then I laughed for the first time in weeks. Because it wasn't just that Travis wanted me back. It was that he finally realized I never should have been replaced. 2 weeks passed after the call with Travis and I didn't hear from him again. No follow-up, no second offer, just silence. The kind of silence you get when someone finally understands they've lost leverage. I thought that might be the end of it. But it was. One morning, while I was reviewing a new logistics integration for Vertex, Lisa stepped into my office with a look I hadn't seen in a while, half nervous, half amused. "You'll never guess who reached out to me," she said. I didn't even have to guess. Travis. Close, one of his strategic advisors, trying to feel me out, asked if I'd be open to rejoining the team under refreshed leadership. She paused. "They're trying to poach." I leaned back in my chair. I wasn't angry, I wasn't even surprised. It was predictable, really. When the foundation cracks, they don't rebuild it, they scramble to glue the pieces back together with whatever's left. "Did you respond?" I asked. Lisa laughed. "Not yet, thought I'd ask you first." I nodded slowly. "Tell them you're happy where you are." "Already am," she said, smiling as she walked out. By the end of that week, both Maria and Ken had received similar messages, some vague outreach from former colleagues, a couple of mid-level managers still hanging on inside the old company, all dancing around the same question: would you ever consider coming back? They were unraveling faster than I'd thought. One afternoon, I got a message from a contact who still worked inside the company, someone who preferred not to be named. It was short. "You didn't hear this from me, they're preparing for a quiet reorg. Jason's out, budget's cut, they're calling it recentering the culture." Translation: panic. And then, "People are scared, they're watching what you built from scratch grow while they're being told to do more with less." That message sat with me for a long time, not because I wanted them to fail, I never did, but because this was all avoidable. They had something that worked, not perfect but functional, solid, trusted. And they'd tossed it aside for flash, for ego, for whatever looked good in a quarterly review. Now they were dealing with the fallout, and I hadn't lifted a finger. Meanwhile, Vertex was thriving. We weren't trying to be flashy, we were trying to be sustainable, practical, smart. My systems had stabilized our operations in half the time we expected. Our margins were improving, the leadership team listened, every win felt earned, and every challenge we faced it together. People were talking, we were becoming the place people wanted to work, and that scared the hell out of my old company. I was at lunch with our CTO one afternoon when she looked at me and said, "I heard your old company tried to get a few of your team back." "Yeah," I said, "they did." "You think they'll stop?" "No," I said simply, "but it won't matter." She nodded like she understood exactly what I meant. Then came the big one. An email, formal this time, from someone much higher up at the old company, someone who used to be unreachable. Subject: collaboration opportunity. "We'd like to explore a potential partnership between our organizations, particularly regarding operational streamlining and system design. We believe there's mutual benefit to be had. Please let us know if you're open to discussion." It wasn't a job offer. It was an olive branch. I read it twice, then once more. I wasn't angry, I wasn't tempted, I was just tired of watching people in positions of power only admit value when things started to fall apart. I forwarded the email to our CEO at Vertex with a simple note. "FYI, seems they're watching closely now. I'm not entertaining anything, just keeping you in the loop." He replied in under 5 minutes. "Good call, let's show them how it's really done." That night I went for a walk. The sun was low, sky turning that soft orange that feels like a sigh at the end of the day. I wasn't walking off frustration anymore, I was walking in peace. I'd done what most people never get to do, walk away from the fire and rebuild something better. I used to think loyalty meant staying no matter what. Now I understood that loyalty is earned, not owed. The people I trusted, they came with me. The systems I built, they thrived where they were respected. The ones who tried to replace me, they were now trying to replicate what they never took the time to understand. Let them watch, let them wonder. Because the truth was simple. They didn't just lose me. They lost everything I'd built with me. A few months had passed, enough time for things to settle, enough time for the dust to clear. At Vertex, we were no longer just stabilizing, we were scaling. What started as a lean rebuild of core systems had evolved into something bigger. My name was now on internal proposals. People were citing my strategies in investor meetings. A junior analyst even referred to our workflow playbook as the Ops Bible. Funny how the same things that once got ignored were now being praised like gospel. I'd learned to enjoy it quietly, not with ego but with pride, because this wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about proving to myself that I could thrive without the weight of being overlooked. Then one morning, I got a call I never expected. It was from Alan. Alan had been my boss's boss, one of those names that sat high on the org chart, rarely seen, often whispered about. The kind of leader who showed up at all hands meetings once a quarter and spoke in bullet points. He hadn't reached out when I was let go, not a single word. I assumed he either didn't notice or didn't care. But now he was calling me. I let it go to voicemail, then I listened. "Hey, it's Alan. I'd appreciate the chance to talk if you're open to it. Nothing urgent, just would like to connect, let me know." That was it, no explanation, no context, just a voice that suddenly wanted to have a conversation months after I'd been erased from their world. I thought about deleting it. But curiosity won. We scheduled a call for later that week. I told my team I'd be offline for half an hour. I didn't say why, I didn't need to. When Alan joined the call, he got straight to the point. "I won't pretend the way things ended was right," he said. "I wasn't part of that decision. If I'm honest, it happened fast and I should have stepped in. That's on me." I stayed quiet. He continued. "I've watched what you've built at Vertex. It's impressive. More than impressive, it's solid. I've spoken to clients who know your name now, and that says something." Still quiet. Then came the part I knew was coming. "We'd like to bring you back, not to your old role, not under Travis, not even on the same terms. We're offering an executive-level position, full autonomy, your team, your structure, clean slate." I sat with that for a moment. Because on paper, it was everything I used to dream of. The title, the resources, the recognition, the authority to finally shape things the way I always knew they could be. But it wasn't 2004 anymore. And I wasn't the guy sharing a chair at a corner desk, hoping someone noticed his extra hours. I was running a system now, one that I had designed, built, tested, and grown, with people I trusted, with leadership that backed my ideas, and without ever once being treated like I was expendable. Alan was still talking, laying out benefits, options, relocation packages. He was painting a picture, one with glossy walls and empty frames. I interrupted him gently. "I appreciate the offer, Alan, I do, and the honesty." He paused, but you're too late." I heard the breath catch just slightly. "I'm not angry anymore," I said, "but I'm not interested. I'm doing the best work of my life right now, and the people I'm building it with, they saw my value from day one." There was a long silence. Then Alan said something I hadn't expected. "You've earned the right to say no, that alone says a lot." We ended the call politely, professionally. But as I closed my laptop, I felt something I hadn't felt since the day I was fired. Closure. Not the kind you chase, the kind that arrives when you've stopped needing anything from the people who once overlooked you. That weekend, I took my wife out to dinner, not to celebrate a deal or a raise or a milestone. "Just us." She raised a glass, "To your peace of mind." I clinked it gently, and to theirs finally being disturbed. Because that's what it really was now. I had peace. And they had regret. It's strange how quiet victory can be. I used to think success was loud, promotions, applause, big announcements. But in reality, it feels like sitting in your office with a cup of coffee, no emails screaming for attention, your team working in sync, and knowing you don't have to look over your shoulder anymore. That's where I was almost a year after it all started. A year since the meeting where Travis slid that envelope across the desk. A year since the silence that followed me out of the building. A year since I walked away, unsure of who I'd be without that job. Now I knew. I was someone who had built something better. Vertex had gone from an ambitious rebuild to a standout example in our industry. We were lean, effective, and profitable. Our systems were being used by partner firms. We'd even landed on the radar of a few major publications for how we'd streamlined supply chains using custom tools. People had started to call us the company that does things the smart way. That alone would have been enough. But then I got the message. It wasn't from Travis. It was from someone I didn't know, a junior staff member at my old company. She joined a few months after I left and had only heard stories. She told me she'd found some of my old documentation while reviewing archived processes. She ended the message with this. I just wanted to say I've never met you, but it's clear you built a lot here. People still mention your name in meetings. Hope you're doing well wherever you are. I sat with that for a while. Not because I needed the validation, but because it reminded me of something I had nearly forgotten. Legacy isn't about titles or awards, it's about impact, quiet, lasting impact. And despite everything, my work had lasted. It had outlived the role, outlived the politics, even outlived the people who thought they could replace me overnight. A few days later, Lisa and I were prepping for a new onboarding session, our biggest group yet. 20 new hires, most of them young, bright-eyed, hopeful. The same way I was in 2004, walking into a dusty office with low expectations and high hopes. Before the session started, one of them approached me. "I read the story about Vertex in Logistics Weekly," he said. "Did you really build the ops system yourself?" I smiled, not alone, but yeah, I started it. He nodded. "That's the kind of career I want, to actually build something." That landed differently. I'd spent so long proving myself to people who didn't care, and now I was surrounded by people who did, even the ones just getting started. After the onboarding, I walked down to the break room. Ken was there, fixing the coffee machine like always. Maria was sketching ideas on the whiteboard by the window. Lisa was laughing with someone I didn't recognize. They looked like a team, like a family, like we'd done more than rebuild a company, we'd rebuilt trust. I stepped outside for some air, letting the late afternoon sun hit my face. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about the past, not Travis, not the board, not the people who didn't see me. Because I wasn't behind them anymore. I was ahead. And I wasn't looking back.